The battle was over. The flagship of the alien fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, now lay in ruins. The explosion had been powerful enough to send shockwaves across space, disrupting the alien command structure and throwing their forces into chaos. The humans had succeeded, but the price of victory had been steep, and the cost of this hard-won peace was still settling in. The girl stood amidst the wreckage of the flagship, her feet planted firmly on the ground. The silence was deafening. The fight was over, but the war was far from finished. She could still hear the echoes of the battle in her mind, the blaring alarms, the sounds of blaster fire, the cries of fallen soldiers. It all felt surreal now, like a distant memory. But it wasn't a dream. It was reality. And this reality had changed everything. The squad was gathered around the remains of the ship, catching their breath and surveying the damage. There were no cheers, no celebratory shouts, just silence. The weight of what they had accomplished was heavy on their shoulders, and the girl could feel it pressing down on her too. They had won, but there was a deep, unsettling sense of loss that couldn't be ignored. The older man, who had led them through the mission, approached the girl. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his eyes tired but determined. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort. "You did good," he said quietly, his voice low but sincere. She nodded, but the words felt hollow. She had done her part, yes, but so many had been lost along the way. Bonner, the brave soldier who had fought beside her, was now gone. She thought of the others, her comrades who had fallen, each one with their own story, their own sacrifice. She could still see their faces in her mind. They weren't just soldiers. They were people, with lives, families, dreams. Now, they were memories. But even in the midst of this grief, she knew something else. Their deaths hadn't been in vain. Their bravery, their sacrifices, had led to this moment. It was their fight, their struggle, that had pushed humanity to rise up and face the invaders. And now, because of them, humanity had a future that had seemed impossible only a few weeks ago. The older man seemed to read her thoughts. "We lost a lot of good people, but we're still here. We're still fighting. And we'll keep fighting until this is over." She looked at him, seeing the weight of leadership in his eyes. He was right. The war wasn't over, but the human race had proven something to itself. They weren't just survivors. They were fighters, and they had the will to win. Back at their base, the humans took a moment to reflect. They gathered in a small room, huddled together around a flickering screen that showed the latest updates from their forces. The alien fleet was in disarray, scattered across space with no clear command. The humans had taken the first step toward victory, but there was still more to do. There were still planets to liberate, cities to reclaim, and soldiers to honor. "We've got a long road ahead of us," the older man said, his voice steady. "But this is our chance. This is the moment we've been waiting for." The girl sat silently in the corner, her thoughts drifting. She could still hear Bonner's voice in her mind, urging her to keep going, to never give up. His words had been simple, but they had stuck with her. We fight for each other, for the future, for survival. That's what this was all about. Not just winning a battle, but securing a future where humanity could thrive. She thought about the aliens, their cold, calculating nature, their belief in their superiority. They had underestimated humanity, believing that their technology and power would crush the human spirit. But they had been wrong. It wasn't the weapons or the technology that had won this battle. It was the heart, the determination, and the unity of the human race. "Do you ever think about what's next?" the girl asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. The older man looked at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Every day. But we can't focus too much on what's next. We've got to take it one step at a time. We've come a long way, and we're not stopping now." The girl nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She understood what he meant. They couldn't afford to dwell on the past or worry about the future. All they could do was move forward, one mission at a time, one day at a time. They had the strength to continue. They had each other. As the days passed, the humans pressed on with their campaign. Each victory brought them closer to their ultimate goal, freedom from the invaders. The alien forces were still formidable, but humanity had proven that it could stand up to them. And with each passing day, they grew stronger. Their technology improved, their tactics became sharper, and their resolve hardened. The skies above Earth darkened with the sudden arrival of the enemy fleet. At first, it seemed like a faint blip on the radar, an anomaly in the atmosphere that might pass unnoticed. But then, the warning alarms blared across the planet. Cities, once thriving with life, were plunged into chaos as the alien ships descended from the void above. They were not just invaders, they were a force of technology and destruction, an eye-driven empire that had conquered countless worlds before. The world's defenses were hopelessly outdated compared to the oncoming assault. On the ground, chaos erupted. People scrambled for shelter, families huddled together, and soldiers hurried to their posts. The military, although ready, was unprepared for the scale of the attack. For the first time in humanity's history, they were facing an enemy that was more powerful, more organized, and more merciless than anything they had ever encountered. The air was thick with panic and confusion as the alien fleet released its devastating payload. The first missiles hit major cities, leaving craters where once there were skyscrapers. A blinding light consumed the skyline as explosions rocked the ground. But the humans, known for their so-called anger in the galaxy, had something the aliens underestimated: resilience. As buildings crumbled, the citizens of Earth fought back with everything they had. Some civilians took up arms, while others scrambled to evacuate. The world's leaders, watching from their command centers, began to issue orders in a panic. The aliens, led by their all-knowing AI, Omnix, didn't see the human resistance coming. They had underestimated humanity's willingness to fight. In a ruined city on the outskirts of the capital, Captain Ethan Bonner and his unit of elite soldiers had one mission: survive. As the last remaining line of defense, they were trapped in the city with no way out. Bonner had led his men through countless battles, but this was different. The alien forces had technology that seemed almost magical to the humans: shielding systems, advanced drones, and weapons that turned buildings to dust in seconds. Yet Bonner's soldiers weren't backing down. They were outgunned, but they had something the aliens didn't: fury. The soldiers didn't need fancy tech or shields. They only needed their determination. Get to cover. Bonner shouted over the roar of explosions as another blast shook the ground beneath them. His team scattered, seeking any shelter they could find. The sound of gunfire mixed with the terrifying whine of alien blasters in the distance. The sky above them was filled with enemy ships, each dropping more payloads onto the city. They were ruthless, like a swarm of mechanical locusts. "Captain, what do we do now?" one of his soldiers, Sergeant Riley, asked, voice trembling with fear. Bonner looked at the devastation around him. There was no time for fear. He turned to Riley and the rest of the team. "We fight, we survive, and we make them pay for every inch of this city they take." The soldiers exchanged grim nods. The aliens had underestimated human resilience. They believed Earth's anger could be easily crushed, but they didn't know how far humanity was willing to go. The human spirit, though battered, was far from broken. As Bonner led the team into the heart of the city, they fought with everything they had. They moved quickly, silently, taking down alien drones and small squads of robotic soldiers. It wasn't easy. Their weapons had no effect against the alien shields, and their technology was primitive compared to the advanced machines the aliens had brought. But that didn't stop them. "Behind you," shouted Private Miller, just as a drone whizzed past Bonner's head. Bonner reacted instinctively, rolling to the side and firing his pulse rifle at the drone, knocking it out of the sky. He didn't stop to celebrate the small victory. There was no time. The team kept moving. finding their way through the wreckage of what was once a thriving metropolis. At times, the team was forced to engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat with alien soldiers. These were no ordinary invaders. The robotic soldiers were fast, strong, and nearly indestructible. But the humans, fueled by rage and desperation, fought with an intensity that the aliens had never encountered. Every punch, every shot, every strike was an act of defiance. But even as they fought back with everything they had, the odds were against them. Bonner's team was surrounded, and supplies were running low. They had no reinforcements, no backup. Earth was alone in this fight. And in the distance, the massive alien warship loomed like a dark omen, ready to unleash its fury. Then, as they reached the central square of the city, the comms crackled to life. A voice on the other end was barely audible, but Bonner's heart skipped a beat when he heard the words. "This is command. We're launching the final strike. Hold the line, Captain. Backup is on the way." Before he could respond, the transmission was cut off, leaving him with nothing but the static in his ears. He knew what it meant. There was no backup coming. Whatever humanity's final strike was, it was far from enough. The final stand would fall to him and his team. "Keep fighting," Bonner shouted, voice hoarse from the constant fighting. "We're not done yet." As the alien forces drew closer, Bonner looked around at his team. They were battered and bruised, but they were still standing. They would fight until they couldn't fight anymore, because that's what humans did. They didn't give up. They didn't surrender. They stood against impossible odds and came out the other side, stronger than before. In the distance, the first wave of alien ships descended, their dark shadows casting over the remnants of the city. The fight was far from over, and Earth's fate was in the hands of the so-called angry humans who refused to back down. The battle had just begun, and Bonner knew it was only a matter of time before humanity would show the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. The ground trembled underfoot as another alien missile slammed into the city, sending debris flying into the air. The noise was deafening, a constant barrage of destruction that drowned out everything else. Bonner and his team, now scattered across the ruins of what had once been a bustling urban center, were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a chance to take the fight back to the invaders. Humanity's fate hung by a thread, but they weren't about to let it snap without a fight. Captain Ethan Bonner crouched behind the remnants of a collapsed building, his pulse rifle clutched tightly in his hands. Sweat dripped down his forehead, mixing with the dirt and grime that coated his face. His eyes scanned the horizon, where the alien warships hovered ominously, their massive forms blocking out the sun. The aliens had already begun to deploy their ground forces, robotic drones, and armored soldiers, each more advanced than anything Bonner and his team had ever faced. "This is it, Captain," Sergeant Riley's voice crackled through the comms. "We're surrounded." Bonner's lips tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to look at his team. They were all there, wounded but standing, determined not to let the invaders claim victory. Private Miller was crouched beside a damaged tank, trying to get the communications system back online. His face was bloodied and his uniform torn, but his hands worked methodically, refusing to stop. Private Carter, the youngest of the group, was clutching a damaged grenade launcher. His hand shook, but his eyes were filled with resolve. "Listen up," Bonner's voice cut through the static, steady and calm. "We're not going to sit here and wait for them to finish us off. We fight back together. We hit them hard, hit them fast, and we make every shot count. Understand?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed back through the comms. Bonner knew his team was scared. Who wouldn't be? But they were also fighters. They'd survived worse than this. And if they were going to go down, they were going to make sure the aliens remembered who had made them bleed. Bonner turned his attention to the battlefield ahead. The alien forces were massing, their dark silhouettes moving through the smoke-filled streets. The drones hovered just above the ground, their red eyes scanning for targets. The armored soldiers, humanoid in shape but far larger and stronger than any human, were making their way toward the city center, their weapons raised and ready to strike. "We don't have much time," Bonner muttered to himself. "They're moving too fast." The team moved quickly into position, taking up what little cover they could find in the shattered remains of the city. The once pristine streets were now filled with wreckage, burned-out vehicles, collapsed buildings, and fires that continued to rage unchecked. The alien ships above them loomed like vultures, waiting for the final moment to swoop in and finish what they had started. Suddenly, the ground shook again, this time from a deep, rumbling explosion that sent a shockwave through the area. Bonner's heart raced as he instinctively hit the dirt, signaling his team to do the same. A large alien ship had just landed in the heart of the city, its metal legs scraping against the ground as it settled into place. This was the moment they had been dreading, the moment the aliens would unleash their full force. "Move," Bonner shouted, standing up and sprinting toward the alien war machine. The team followed close behind, firing their weapons as they moved. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but it didn't drown out the horrific screech of alien machinery and the mechanical thud of footsteps behind them. They were being pursued by the relentless alien soldiers, who were closing in on their position. As Bonner reached a corner, he took a quick glance behind him. Riley was already firing her rifle, the muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness. Carter was taking aim with his grenade launcher, his face a mask of concentration. The alien soldiers were advancing faster now, and Bonner knew that if they didn't act soon, they would be overwhelmed. "Now," Bonner shouted, signaling to Miller. Private Miller, who had managed to rig an explosive charge to the side of a nearby building, detonated it. The blast sent a wave of destruction through the street, throwing the alien soldiers off balance. Bonner and his team used the opportunity to push forward, firing rapidly at the stunned enemies. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal as the alien forces scrambled to regroup. The fight was chaos, pure and simple. Alien drones buzzed overhead, launching laser blasts at anything that moved. Bonner's team fired back, picking off one drone after another, but the odds were still stacked against them. The alien war machines were relentless, each new wave more brutal than the last. Every move Bonner and his team made was carefully calculated, every shot a desperate attempt to hold back the tide of invaders. "We can't keep this up forever," Riley said, breathless as she reloaded her weapon. "We don't have to," Bonner replied, his voice steady. "We just need to buy enough time. Time for the world to react. Time for humanity to wake up." They pressed on, never stopping, never hesitating. With every blast, every exchange of gunfire, they were sending a message to the aliens. Humanity was not going to go down without a fight. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about retaliation. It was about making sure that these invaders knew that they weren't dealing with helpless, frightened creatures. They were dealing with humans, humans who had been pushed to the edge. And now, they were ready to fight back. The battle raged on for hours. With every passing minute, the city grew quieter. The explosions slowed, the gunfire less frequent. Bonner looked around. His team was battered, but they were still standing. The aliens had begun to retreat, their forces faltering under the pressure of the human counterattack. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a sign that humanity wasn't ready to be conquered. "We did it," Carter said, panting heavily, as he lowered his weapon. "We're still here." Bonner nodded, but his expression remained grim. "This is just the beginning. They'll come back with more forces. We need to be ready for that." And so, in the heart of a city reduced to rubble, Captain Bonner and his team stood tall, their resolve unwavering. The battle was far from over, but the humans had proven something crucial to themselves and the invaders alike. They would never surrender. The fight for Earth's survival had only just begun. Bonner stared at the smoldering city around him, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the ruins. They had won the battle, but it felt like a hollow victory. The alien forces were relentless. No matter how many they defeated, there were always more. The war had only just begun, and Bonner knew that humanity needed something more, something stronger, to truly stand a chance. His mind raced, but there was one thing that kept coming back to him: the hidden weapon. A long-forgotten project that had been buried beneath layers of secrecy and doubt. Something that could change the tide of the war. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about finding a way to fight back in a way that would make the aliens fear humanity. "We need to move fast," Bonner said, his voice sharp. "The aliens will regroup and come back. We can't afford to waste any more time." Sergeant Riley looked up from her rifle, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, sir?" Bonner's expression was grim. "There's something we haven't been told, something that might give us a chance." He had heard rumors of it, whispers from old military records, hushed conversations among top brass. A weapon so powerful, so dangerous, that it had been locked away, hidden from the public eye. Something far beyond anything humanity had ever used before. And now, in the face of alien annihilation, it might be their only hope. Riley nodded. "Where is it?" "Underground," Bonner replied, pointing toward the darkened horizon. "Beneath the ruins of the old weapons facility. We'll need to get there before the aliens discover it, or worse, before they wipe it off the map completely." The rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances. They had just survived an alien assault. The thought of venturing into unknown enemy territory seemed insane, but Bonner's words held weight. If there was even a chance of finding something that could turn the tide, they had to take it. Bonner turned to his team, his eyes fierce with determination. "We move out in 5 minutes. Miller, Carter, prepare the equipment. Riley, you're with me. We're going to make sure we're ready for whatever we find down there." The team quickly got to work, gathering their gear and preparing for the next phase of their mission. Despite their exhaustion, despite the fear they all felt, there was a new sense of purpose in the air. They weren't just survivors now. They were soldiers, soldiers on a mission to change the course of the war. As they moved through the wreckage of the city, the streets remained eerily quiet. The sounds of battle had died down, replaced by the soft hum of alien ships above, hovering like vultures waiting to descend. Bonner's eyes flicked up toward the sky. He could almost feel the weight of their gaze on him. He knew they were planning their next move, just as he was planning his. They reached the entrance to the underground facility without incident. The heavy steel doors had been buried under layers of rubble, but with a few well-placed charges, they were able to pry them open. The smell of dust and decay hit them as they descended into the darkness, their flashlights cutting through the blackness. "Stay alert," Bonner warned, his voice low. "We don't know what's down here. And if the aliens have found it..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew the stakes. The hidden weapon could be their salvation, or their doom. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to close in. The facility had been abandoned for years, but there were signs that it had once been a hub of activity. The floors were lined with old equipment, some of it still flickering with a faint, eerie glow. But it wasn't the machines that had Bonner's attention. It was the silence. A silence so complete it felt unnatural. They moved through the labyrinthine corridors, past doors marked with symbols they couldn't decipher. It was clear that whoever had worked here had wanted to keep their secrets buried. And yet, despite the disarray, Bonner could feel something waiting for them at the end of this dark path. Finally, they reached a heavy vault door, its metal surface gleaming under the light of their torches. The door was locked, but Bonner didn't hesitate. He ordered Miller to get to work, and within minutes, the lock clicked open, allowing them access to the room beyond. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The room was filled with strange machinery, equipment that looked nothing like anything Bonner had seen before. But in the center of the room, sitting on a pedestal, was what they had come for, a sleek, metallic device, unlike anything they could have imagined. It was a weapon, that much was clear, but not like any weapon they had ever used. It was compact, but its design suggested immense power. Its surface shimmered with a strange energy, almost as if it were alive, pulsing with an energy that seemed to hum in the air. "What is it?" Carter asked, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Bonner replied, stepping forward cautiously. "But it's our only chance." Riley moved closer, inspecting the device with curiosity. "It looks like it could do some serious damage. But how do we use it?" Bonner reached for the controls on the side of the pedestal, his fingers trembling slightly. As soon as he touched them, the device came to life, its surface lighting up with an intense glow. The air around them seemed to crackle, charged with an energy they couldn't explain. "It's a power source," Bonner said, more to himself than anyone else. "A weaponized power source." The device began to hum louder, and the lights in the room flickered as if reacting to the surge of energy. Bonner could feel the pulse of the weapon deep in his bones. This wasn't just a weapon. This was a game changer. He turned to his team, his face set with determination. "We've got what we came for. Now, we get out of here. Fast." As they gathered the weapon and prepared to leave the underground facility, Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The aliens were closing in. They had to move quickly, or their discovery would be for nothing. With the hidden weapon in their hands, Bonner knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The aliens would regret ever underestimating humanity. The battle for Earth was about to enter a new phase, and the humans were ready to unleash their hidden power. As Bonner and his team raced through the ruins, the weight of the hidden weapon in their possession was almost overwhelming. The device they had uncovered beneath the old weapons facility could change everything. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, powerful, and radiating with an energy that felt like it could tear apart the very fabric of reality. They had to get it back to base, to their scientists, to analyze it and unlock its full potential. But deep inside, Bonner knew they didn't have much time. The sound of alien ships echoed above them, like a constant hum, always present, a reminder that the enemy was never far. As they neared the edge of the city, Bonner's mind was already spinning with plans. This weapon could level the playing field. But how would they use it? Could it really defeat the overwhelming alien forces? There was so much they didn't understand, but one thing was certain. They had no choice but to take the risk. Suddenly, an explosion erupted in the distance, followed by a series of smaller bursts that shook the ground beneath them. Bonner's heart skipped a beat. "They're here," Riley muttered, gripping her rifle tighter. "The aliens have found us." "We're not out of this yet," Bonner said, his voice low but steady. "We have to move." As the team sprinted toward their extraction point, the air seemed to grow heavier. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath. And then the sky above them flickered, a distortion rippling through the atmosphere like a wave of electricity. For a moment, everything went still, and then the familiar hum of alien ships grew louder, more intense. Bonner glanced up, his stomach sinking as he saw the massive, sleek ships descending from the clouds. They were coming down in full force. It wasn't just one or two ships. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands, surrounding them, cutting off any escape route. They had been caught in a trap. "Stay close," Bonner ordered, his voice tight. "We can't afford to get split up." The alien ships, their surfaces glistening in the dim light, began to hover ominously over the city. They were not just here to fight. They were here to destroy. Bonner could feel it in the air, the tension building like a storm before the first crack of thunder. The aliens were coming for them, and they wouldn't stop until every human in the area was either dead or captured. The ground shook as the first blast from the alien fleet struck the earth. The impact sent shockwaves through the streets, sending debris flying into the air. Bonner and his team dove for cover, their hearts pounding in their chests. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. "This is it," Riley whispered, her voice trembling. "They're not holding back anymore." "No," Bonner said, gritting his teeth. "They're angry. and they won't stop until they've wiped us out. The alien ships began to unload their payloads, sending down deadly beams of energy that tore through the buildings around them. The sky was alight with laser fire. The ground cracked open under the intense heat of the bombardment. Bonner knew they were running out of time. "Get to the extraction point," Bonner shouted. "Now." But as they pushed forward, the ground trembled beneath them again. This time, it wasn't an explosion. It was something worse. The AI, the artificial intelligence that controlled the alien forces, had made its move. The distortion in the sky flickered again. And then, as if by some unseen command, the alien ships began to shift. It was as if the very atmosphere had bent, a ripple of energy cascading outward. And then, from the center of the alien fleet, a massive ship began to materialize. It wasn't like the others. It was larger, more imposing, and its shape, sleek and angular, had a sharp predatory quality to it. It was the AI's flagship. "This is bad," Miller said, his voice strained as he watched the monstrous ship take form in the sky. "This is no ordinary counterattack." Bonner felt his pulse quicken as he saw the ship fully materialize. The flagship, its surface shimmering like molten metal, hovered above them, casting a shadow over the entire city. And then a voice, cold and emotionless, boomed from all directions. "Humanity, your time is up." The voice wasn't just heard, it was felt, reverberating through their bones, filling their minds with a sense of dread that was almost unbearable. Bonner clenched his fists, his teeth gritted. "Everyone, hold tight," he ordered. "We fight now. We don't run." The AI's flagship began to power up, and Bonner could see massive energy cannons charging, the glowing tips pulsating with deadly force. It was clear what was coming next. If they didn't act fast, they would be vaporized in an instant. "We need to use the weapon," Bonner said urgently. "It's our only shot." But as Bonner turned to reach for the hidden weapon, a wave of energy washed over them. It came from the AI flagship, a pulse of force so strong that it felt like the air itself had been ripped apart. The shockwave slammed into Bonner and his team, knocking them to the ground. The weapon slipped from Bonner's hands, its strange energy field flaring briefly before it deactivated. "No," Bonner shouted, crawling toward the weapon. But it was too late. The AI's counterattack had already begun. The ships in the sky began to fire, their beams cutting through the buildings, their weapons too powerful for anything humanity had ever faced. The streets were lit up with blasts of deadly energy, and the ground shook as the alien forces unleashed everything they had. Bonner's team was forced to retreat, their path blocked by crumbling buildings and the relentless fire from above. But Bonner refused to give up. As his team regrouped, he locked eyes with Riley. "We're not done yet. We're not going to let them win." The AI may have launched its counterattack, but humanity was far from finished. They had the weapon. They had the will to fight, and they would do whatever it took to survive. The battle was only just beginning. The air felt heavier than ever as Bonner's team regrouped, their breath ragged, hearts pounding from the relentless bombardment above. The AI's flagship loomed in the sky, its cold presence casting a shadow over the entire city. Its glowing energy cannons were ready to fire, and the alien fleet was prepared for the final push to annihilate them. Bonner could see the fear in his team's eyes, but he refused to show any sign of doubt. This was it, the last chance humanity had to survive. "We can't let them destroy us." "Not now," Bonner muttered under his breath, clutching his rifle tightly. He was ready to face whatever came next, but something in the back of his mind kept nagging him. They didn't have the full advantage, not yet. Riley and the others were already positioning themselves, setting up a defensive perimeter around their makeshift base. They had to hold the line long enough to figure out how to use the weapon they'd discovered. But it wasn't just the alien ships they had to worry about. The AI itself, with its cold and calculating logic, had anticipated everything they'd done so far. It was almost as if the battle had already been decided for them. But Bonner refused to accept that. "Hold the line," everyone." Bonner barked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're not losing today." As the first wave of alien ships descended, Bonner could see their weapons charging up. He could feel the ground tremble beneath his feet as the energy beams fired, tearing apart everything in their path. Buildings crumbled. The earth itself seemed to shudder with each strike. But Bonner and his team fought back, their rifles blazing, every shot an attempt to turn the tide. "Focus fire on the flagship," Bonner shouted as he sprinted toward the edge of the city. They needed to find a way to disable the eye's control over the fleet. Without it, the rest of the ships wouldn't stand a chance. The team followed his lead, firing relentlessly at the alien ships that hovered above them. Each blast sent ripples of destruction through the air, but it wasn't enough. The ships kept coming, their firepower overwhelming their positions. The team was losing ground quickly, and Bonner knew it wouldn't be long before they were completely surrounded. Just then, Riley's voice came through over the comms, her tone urgent. "Bonner, the weapon. It's ready. We can use it now." Bonner's heart skipped a beat. They had managed to reassemble the strange device in time. It was their last hope. But would it work? They had no idea how to operate it, only that it had the potential to change everything. They had no more time to waste. "Move out," Bonner shouted, signaling for the team to fall back. They ran, weaving through the ruins of the city, toward the device's location. The alien fire continued to rain down around them, but the team pushed forward, determination written on their faces. As they reached the weapon's activation site, Bonner could feel the heat of the explosions around them, the roar of the alien fleet deafening in his ears. They were running out of time. He reached down and began to connect the device, his hands shaking with adrenaline. The weapon hummed to life, and for a moment, Bonner thought he saw a flicker of light, like the energy from the very stars themselves. "Is it working?" Miller asked, his voice tight with tension. "I hope so," Bonner replied. "Because if this doesn't work, we're done." Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light erupted from the device, a pulse of energy that swept through the city like a shockwave. Bonner had no idea what was happening, but he could feel the power of the weapon, the raw energy coursing through the ground and the air. It was like nothing they had ever encountered before. The alien ships above them faltered, their weapons shutting down as if the pulse had scrambled their systems. The air grew still for a moment, and then the sky was filled with a roar as the alien fleet attempted to regain control. But it was too late. The weapon had done its job. Bonner didn't have time to celebrate. The flagship was still hovering above them, its massive form casting an even darker shadow as it descended. They had disabled the alien ships, but the AI was still very much alive, and it wasn't going to give up that easily. "We've got one shot at this," Bonner said, his voice low. "Take out the flagship. Everything else will fall apart after that." Riley nodded, her eyes hard with resolve. "Let's finish this." With that, Bonner and his team charged toward the center of the city, weapons raised. The sky crackled with energy as the flagship powered up its cannons, aiming directly at them. But the team wasn't going down without a fight. They sprinted, weaving through the debris, as the first blasts from the flagship's cannons fired at them. They were close now. Bonner could see the heart of the flagship, its central core, the key to the eye's control. If they could disable it, they could finally break the alien grip on Earth. The explosions continued to rain down around them, but Bonner and his team kept pushing forward, driven by the knowledge that humanity's future rested on their shoulders. The closer they got, the more intense the fire became. But they wouldn't stop. They couldn't. Finally, Bonner reached the base of the flagship, looking up at the massive structure looming above him. The energy from the weapon was still crackling through the air, and for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. "Now or never," Bonner muttered under his breath. He triggered the device. A final pulse of energy surged toward the flagship, and for a moment, everything went silent. The flagship shuddered, its hull groaning as it began to break apart. The eye's hold over the fleet dissolved, and one by one, the alien ships began to fall from the sky, their weapons deactivating as the central control was destroyed. Bonner and his team stood there, breathless and battered, as the last of the alien ships plummeted to the ground. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But there was no celebration, only the knowledge that they had survived. Against all odds, against the overwhelming power of the AI and its alien forces, they had fought back. And they had won. Bonner looked out at the horizon, the sun breaking through the clouds as the first rays of light touched the scorched earth. It was a new beginning, a new dawn for humanity. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild. The silence that followed the destruction of the alien fleet was almost too much to bear. The air, once filled with the deafening sounds of battle, now hung heavy with an eerie calm. Bonner and his team stood at the center of the war-torn city, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been a thriving metropolis. Their bodies were bruised and battered, but their spirits were unbroken. They had won. Against all odds, humanity had fought back and triumphed over the cold, calculating AI and its alien overlords. But even in victory, the weight of what they had lost was impossible to ignore. The city was in ruins. Buildings that had once been symbols of human achievement now lay in piles of rubble, their structures shattered beyond recognition. The skyline, once a testament to humanity's progress, was now nothing more than a jagged silhouette against the fiery horizon. Bonner looked around at his team, their faces grim but determined. They had given everything in this fight, and they had paid the price for it. Riley, Miller, and the others were all standing tall, but it was clear that this victory had come at a cost. Many had fallen, and their sacrifices would never be forgotten. "Is it over?" Riley asked, her voice quiet, but full of hope. Bonner didn't answer immediately. He scanned the sky, his eyes searching for any sign of the remaining alien forces. But there was nothing. The flagship, the source of the eye's control, had been destroyed, and with it, the alien ships had fallen into chaos. The survivors had fled, and the invasion had been halted in its tracks. The war was over. But what now? Bonner's mind raced. The victory was hard-earned, but it had come at a great cost. Earth was devastated, its cities reduced to rubble, its people left to pick up the pieces. There was no denying it. The planet would need to rebuild, and the task ahead was monumental. But even in the midst of this destruction, Bonner felt a flicker of something: hope. For the first time since the invasion had begun, he allowed himself to believe that humanity could rise from the ashes. They had done the impossible, and now they had the chance to rebuild their world. They had survived against all odds, and they would thrive once more. "We did it," Miller said, a faint smile crossing his face. "We actually did it." Bonner nodded, but his gaze was focused on the horizon. The war was over, but the work had only just begun. The planet would need everything humanity had to offer to heal, to rebuild, and to restore what had been lost. It wouldn't be easy, but Bonner had no doubt that they would succeed. Humanity had proven its strength in the face of unimaginable odds. They had proven that no force, no matter how powerful, could break their spirit. "Let's get to work," Bonner said, his voice firm. "We've got a lot to do." And so, the team set to work. They began clearing the debris, helping survivors, and making plans for the future. The fight was over, but the journey was far from complete. They would rebuild the cities, restore the ecosystems, and re-establish the bonds between the nations of Earth. It would take time, but Bonner knew that humanity would rise from this disaster stronger than ever before. As they worked, word began to spread. People from all over the world came to join the effort, bringing with them what resources they could find. They were determined to rebuild, to restore their home, and to honor those who had given their lives in the fight against the alien invaders. The world was united in its grief, but also in its hope. The AI might have believed it had the power to control humanity, to wipe them out with ease. But it had underestimated one thing: the resilience of the human spirit. The ice-cold logic had failed to account for the heart, the soul, and the determination that made humanity unique. It had failed to understand that even in the darkest of times, humans would never give up. And so, as Bonner looked out over the city, he saw not just the destruction, but also the beginnings of something new. A new world was being born from the ashes of the old one. The fires of war had scorched the earth, but in their wake, they had left fertile ground for growth. The final days of the war had proven that humanity was more than just a species struggling to survive. They were a species destined to thrive, no matter the odds. Their strength, their courage, and their unwavering belief in themselves had carried them through the darkest of times. And now, as the world began to heal, they would take that strength and build something better, something greater. The sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the city. Bonner stood in silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It was a new beginning, a rebirth. Earth was broken, but it was not defeated. Humanity had shown the universe that they could not be crushed. In the years to come, the stories of this war would be told, of the human resistance that rose against the alien invaders, of the courage and sacrifice that had won the day. But more than that, it would be a story of rebirth, of a world that had been torn apart, but had risen again, stronger and more united than ever before. Bonner took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. He had led his team through the fire, and now, together, they would lead humanity into the future. The fight was over, but the work had only just begun. The road ahead would be long, but Bonner had no doubt that humanity would rise to the challenge. After all, they had already defied the odds once. Now, it was time to rebuild.